Today's speaker is Natalie Larson. She is the coalition coordinator for the Key Coalition. She comes to Peer Services with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Biology from Northwestern. She's dedicated to equitable access to mental health treatment and substance abuse prevention, and has extensive experience in both research and advocacy. And this is a topic near and dear to my heart, as my son, who is a recovering alcoholic, is also a licensed chemical dependency counselor and deals with mental health and substance abuse. So, Natalie, come on up. Didn't know it was all in family.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Let me see if I can get this full screen. All right. Hello. So today our presentation is going to be on talking with young people about substance use, having meaningful conversations, and modeling healthy habits. So like Bob was so wonderful to introduce me, my name is Natalie Larson. I am the coalition coordinator for the Knowledge Empowers Youth Coalition. And here with me, I have Erin Teggy. She is the prevention director for Peer Services. So before we get started, I wanted to tell you all a little bit about us and who we are. So like I said, I'm coming here from the Knowledge Empowers Youth Coalition. We are a local community coalition aimed at reducing youth substance use, so reducing the use of e-cigarettes, cannabis, alcohol, and other substances among our youth and young adults in New Trier Township. We are a group of community stakeholders, so we partner with libraries, law enforcement, schools, parents, kids, and everyone else in the community to make sure that youth feel that their mental health needs are valued and that the substance-free choice is an easy choice for our youth. I'll let Erin quickly introduce Peer Services. Peer Services is the Key Coalition's primary fiscal agent.
Such a formal title for Peer Services. I'm excited to be here as well and joining Natalie on this really important topic. A really brief introduction to Peer Services. Peer Services is a substance use prevention and treatment organization that serves the North Shore of the Chicagoland area, the north side of the city. Our main office is located in downtown Evanston, and then we also have a location in Skokie. But we are actually celebrating our 50th anniversary this year at Peer Services. And so we, Peer Services as an organization, we really focus on minimizing the harms of substance use, providing treatment for adolescents, adults, older adults, anywhere in between. I think our youngest can be 12 all the way up to any age, and really supporting folks who are on their substance use recovery journey, meeting them where they are, providing individual counseling, group counseling. We do also have a medicated assisted recovery program if medication is needed to help support someone who might be struggling with an opioid use disorder or alcohol use disorder. And then I'm the prevention director, and so I work, and our team, which Natalie is a part of, we work on really supporting our youth in learning and understanding about substance use, the risks associated with it, and helping them, make the best decision for themselves, which hopefully is non-use. So yeah, that's a little bit about Peer, and we're excited to be here. And I'm going to turn it back to Natalie as we get into our topic.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Sorry, I'm struggling with this microphone. Just the location of it is... No, it's okay. This is fine. I'm just leaning forward, so I apologize. So today, what we're going to be talking about, first, we will be introducing the idea of fostering healthy habits across generations. Second, we will be talking about understanding youth substance use. Third, we will talk about why these kind of conversations matter. Fourth, we will be discussing strategies for talking with youth about substance use. Fifth, we will be discussing modeling responsible substance use practices. And last, we will share some local resources with you all. So to start off, I want to get this kind of question in your head, and that is, why are older adults important in substance use prevention? Oops. And to think about that question, we kind of have to think about this concept of intergenerational learning, which is that transfer of knowledge, skills, values, and practices across generations. So, as older adults, you all serve as role models, whether that be for your kids, your grandkids, your family friends, or any other young people in your life. They look up to you, right? And this is especially important when we're talking about substance use. So, youth model the behaviors that they see in their role models, and the responsible use of substances is something that can stick with them and influence their future choices. So, for example, say you have a kid whose grandparent is constantly drinking and using drugs. Think about how that might affect them when, say, they become a high schooler or a young adult. That will probably have a pretty negative impact on them, right? So, this is why demonstrating those healthy habits is so important for you all. Additionally, young people have a lot of respect for older adults' life experiences and wisdom. Although it may not always seem like it, your youth and your life want to know about your life experiences and what you've been through. And I'm sure each of you has had extensive personal experience with substances, whether it be personal, with a friend, a family member. And so, really utilizing that life experience and that wisdom that you've gained over time to have these conversations with youth is super important, because that is very, very impactful. Finally, older adults can be important in substance use prevention, as youth may find it easier to talk to you, a grandparent or a family friend, than a parent. When talking about these hard topics like substance use, youth may be a little nervous or anxious to talk to parents sometimes. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to be punished for what they're going to say. However, by talking to someone who's not their direct caregiver, might be a little easier for them to have those difficult conversations. Now, we're not saying at all that parents shouldn't talk to their kids about substance use. They definitely should. But in some scenarios, it might be easier for youth to share information with an older adult. So now we'll move into understanding youth substance use. So there are many reasons as to why youth may use substances. One of these primary reasons is due to pre-existing mental health issues like stress, anxiety, or depression. By using substances, this can serve as a way to temporarily distract youth from negative thoughts or emotions they may be dealing with. They may see substance use as their only way to cope with their problems. Additionally, peers have a large influence on youth in relation to substance use. So, adolescence is a time of exploration where youth are gaining more freedom from their parents and they're forming closer bonds with their friends. And during adolescence, you're kind of hyper aware of your social status. You want to be liked by your friends and avoid rejection from peers. So this may make an adolescent or a youth more likely to take substances if offered by a friend, especially if they feel pressured to do so due to that fear of rejection and wanting to be liked. Youth may use out of curiosity or a desire to experiment. So during adolescence, parts of the brain that control reward and emotional thinking develop a little bit faster than those that control rational decision making. So this may make it more likely for youth to engage in certain risky behaviors like substance use out of that desire to experiment and be curious. Similar to mental health issues, youth may use to feel good or to escape their problems, Like I said, substance use may give that feeling of relaxation or euphoria, and that can serve as a temporary distraction. Finally, nowadays, unfortunately, social media has a huge impact on youth substance use. So those apps like Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok have millions of users. They can kind of glamorize youth substance use and make it seem more common than it really is. They can even provide outlets for youth to directly access substances like cannabis and nicotine through the internet. So constant exposure to this kind of content on social media can increase youth's curiosity or desire to experiment. So when it comes to risk factors for youth substance use, there are a multitude of things that could contribute to a youth's risk for using substances. Like I said before, mental health issues such as depression and anxiety could be a risk, as youth may use substances to cope with their mental health issues. Another risk factor is childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences include things like experiencing or witnessing abuse, violence, neglect, experiencing poverty, homelessness, food insecurity, among many other situations that may be harmful to youth. A lack of school connectedness or not feeling connected to one's school environment, or a low academic achievement could also be risk factors. So low academic achievement could lead youth to have decreased motivation for positive accomplishments, and a lack of school connectedness could lead to some isolation, and both of those could be a risk factor for substance use. Peer pressure or having friends who use substances is a risk factor because, like I said, youth are more likely to be influenced by their peers and thus start trying substances if they have friends who are using. A family history of substance use is a big risk factor. Growing up in an environment where substance use is common makes youth kind of have this warped perception that substance use is the norm, and so that can be a risk factor. Similarly, favorable parental attitudes on substance use. So if parents either are okay with their youth using substances or do not explain the risks or dangers of substance use during youth, this may also create that perception that substance use is okay and normal, which may lead them to use. Okay, so this graph up here, I apologize if it's a little difficult to see, but this is the percentages of youth in suburban Cook County who have used alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis products in the past 30 days before taking this survey. This is the Illinois Youth Survey. This is showing data on youth behaviors from various parts of Illinois. Specifically, this is showing Cook County, suburban Cook County data. So alcohol, which is those three bars on the left, alcohol is the most commonly used substance by our youth, with 7% of 8th graders, 14% of 10th graders, and 27% of 12th graders having used in the past 30 days. Rates of tobacco and cannabis use are pretty similar for second and third place. So rates of tobacco use are 3% for 8th graders, 7% for 10th graders, and 12% for 12th graders within the past 30 days before survey. Rates of cannabis use are 2% for 8th graders, 6% for 10th graders, and 13% for 12th graders within the 30 days before survey. So alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis are the three most commonly used substances by teens in suburban Cook County. And this is pretty similar to what we see on a national and a state level. So these trends are pretty consistent with national data. However, while these are the three most commonly used substances by youth, they are not the only substances used by youth. Youth also misuse prescription pain medications, hallucinogens, inhalants, and many other types of substances. So these statistics show just how important it is to talk with your youth and have conversations about substance use. Okay, now why do conversations like these matter? So it's actually been shown that one of the biggest protective factors against youth substance use is strong support from family. Now, most of this research has focused on the parent-child relationship, but we have seen many reliable studies concluding that trust and support from grandparents can decrease a youth's risk of negative mental health outcomes like depression or anxiety, which are linked to substance use. Additionally, conversations about substance use reduce the stigma. So for teens, substance use is a very taboo topic. Talking about it can be scary or nerve-wracking. And by initiating these conversations with your youth, they may feel more comfortable coming to you if a situation does occur where, say, they do use a substance or they experience a friend with substance use. So it's really important to initiate these conversations and talk with the youth in your life. All right, I am going to turn it over to Erin for the rest of the presentation here.
All right. So hopefully Natalie hopefully it didn't take much convincing as to why this is an important topic. So now I am going to get into kind of how to go about doing this. Some actionable things that you can do with the kiddos in your life, the teens in your life, that you can, maybe put into practice. Maybe it's with your grandkids, great nieces and nephews. Share some tips with your own kids if they're the parents on how to go about doing this. So we have a few strategies on how to talk with youth about this topic. So like Natalie said, there is still stigma around it. It can be hard. There's so much variety of information, both pro and con regarding substances, that it can be really challenging to kind of navigate. So here are some things, just to kind of keep in mind as we think about having these conversations. So we're always talking with adults, parents, grandparents, people who work with youth, always be engaged. Put that phone down, be focused, be engaged with those youth in having these conversations. Being able to use kind of naturally occurring situations to bring this up can be incredibly helpful. I guess luckily, our society provides lots of opportunities to talk about substance use, whether you just, watched a movie that was displaying substance use, or you saw an advertisement, or you drove past Old Orchard in one of the cannabis dispensaries. There's definitely opportunities that, just are naturally occurring in our life to really start these conversations and be engaged with our youth. One of the other really important components to this is having ongoing conversations. So we're not just, sitting down and having one talk. I remember when I was a kid, the trusted adults in my life, I had like one talk about drugs and alcohol and one talk about other risky behavior, and that was it. It was the one-time lecture, no other times. But it is so important as we are conversing and talking with the youth in our life, just to bring these up over and over and over. We kind of have a little catchphrase, I guess, in prevention that we use. It's not one 60-minute conversation, it's 60 one-minute conversations. Just to really emphasize how these can be small, short, little conversations that we're having with the teens in our life. We also want to make sure we're creating that environment of honesty and respect, so that our teens feel trusted when, talking to you all, and they have that respect for you and you have that respect for them. That really will help them to open up and talk and share, so that you can have really productive conversations on these topics. And then also what can be really, really helpful is to have a little knowledge and information about resources for them. Know where in the community they can go if they're struggling, or maybe recommend, hey, do you know who your social worker is at school? Who is your trusted adult? Here's a credible source on the internet that we can go and look for information if we don't have all the answers. Because if they see that you have some of that knowledge about these resources, they may not need it in that moment. It might be down the road that they need some of these resources, or they could need it for a friend. And so if they see you as this, knowledgeable person, as knowledgeable as we can be on all of the ever-changing substance use trends, but that will also help them keep coming back and keeping these conversations going. So I do always like to talk about what prevention is not, and what these conversations are not. I think, some of you probably remember some of these different substance use campaigns that have existed over the past many, many decades. What we do in prevention is not just say no, because that's not effective. It's not the egg in the frying pan commercials from like the 80s or whenever that was. I do remember those. It's not dare. I went through dare. Dare was highly ineffective. And it's not scare tactics. We don't want to scare our kids into not doing something, because that's not effective at all. We want to make sure it is a conversation about how drugs and alcohol can impact their health, their goals, their future, whatever's important to them. And really focusing on increasing those protective factors, minimizing those risk factors that Natalie had spoken about, and really focusing on their overall health and well-being, and helping them have those skills in order to face situations, face that peer pressure, mental health challenges, etc. So yes, it is not what I think many of us are probably used to of what prevention previously was. So other things to keep in mind when talking and listening with our youth. And we always include that listening piece, because listening is just as important as talking. Whenever we are talking with youth, we work in many of the high schools around here. The consistent message that teens are always saying is they want the important trusted adults in their lives to simply listen without judgment. And so providing that listening ear can be so important. Yes, you all have really important things to say as well, but sometimes as that adult, we do just need to sit back and listen. Like I said, it is absolutely about their health and well-being. One of the activities that we do with youth pretty regularly is helping them think through what their goals are. All of our teens here in our communities are so driven, so motivated, have so many goals for all the things that they want to do, and really using that as a platform then to talk about, well, if you were to use alcohol, how would that impact your goal of being class president? Or you want to be first chair in trumpet, how would vaping impact your goal if you did that? So really trying to connect what is important and meaningful for that youth and how substances can impact them. Definitely coming from that place of love and concern, not judgment, like I said. And definitely this next one, talking about your own experiences, your own memories, your own mistakes. And I think as a grandparent, as an older adult, you have that advantage of not necessarily being their parent. So it is a little bit easier to have this. But I do think it's also important for you all to kind of know and understand how the landscape of substances has changed significantly over the past few decades. Cannabis is a completely different product than what it was back in the 80s, 70s, and before. Nicotine has changed significantly, and the products that are out now are way different than what used to exist. Alcohol has even changed. There's way more options for alcohol than there used to be. And so I think kind of knowing and understanding some of those changes as you're having these conversations is super helpful too. Definitely talking through specific situations, if there are situations of peer pressure or whatever, talking through those specifically can be helpful. And also, and this is something that we also tell parents, and is a good thing for parents to have, work out with their kiddos. Talk about how they would get out of uncomfortable situations. Maybe they show up at a party and they didn't know that there was going to be alcohol and there's alcohol, and now they don't know what to do. Talk with them about how to get out of that. Have a code word, have, some way for them to get out of that situation can be so helpful. Because, in that situation, if they're in an uncomfortable situation, it's emotionally charged. They might not, their emotions are going all over the place. And so if you have a plan in place already, that can be really, really helpful. And that's definitely more so than just substance related. It can be any sort of uncomfortable situation. But talking through some of those specifics can be really, really helpful. So one of the other components to this whole process, like Natalie had talked about at the beginning, is modeling responsible use. So, those most used substances, alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis are all legal in Illinois for anyone over the age of 21. So once they reach the age of 21, luckily their brains are almost fully developed. So there may be situations in which they choose to engage in substance use as an adult. And so we want to make sure that they know and understand how to do so safely. And some of that can come from us as the adults in their lives modeling this healthy behavior. So I'm going to go through quickly because I typically don't like telling adults what to do. So, but things to keep in mind. And how you can be that positive role model, how you can demonstrate these healthy habits, this overall well-being as it relates to different substances. So I do have slides for medication, so prescription medications and some on alcohol and also cannabis. So in terms of medication use, so there definitely are lots of medications out in the world. There's lots of benefits for medication, but we also know that there's risks associated with medications. So we want to make sure that we are taking them safely, responsibly, et cetera. So making sure we are keeping track of all of our medications, having a medication record, because especially if you have multiple medications that you're taking, it's really important to keep all of that straight. Making sure we're reading our prescription bottles, the labels properly for dosage and frequency and all of that stuff. If it needs to be taken with food, if you shouldn't mix alcohol with medications, and et cetera. Definitely, if you're prescribed an opioid, having naloxone or Narcan available in the event of an unintentional overdose. And so things that we want to make sure we are responsibly taking and utilizing the prescription medications that we might be prescribed. Also, another thing is medication storage. And so from our kind of prevention perspective and when we're thinking about youth substance use, one of the prevention methods that we focus on is access. How might youth be accessing substances? And so when it comes to things like prescription medications, alcohol, cannabis, et cetera, it is making sure that we are properly storing these substances. And especially if someone does have opioids in their home, stimulants in their home, we want to make sure those are properly stored so that they aren't accessible by someone who shouldn't be accessing it. So that can be keeping it locked up. And I totally forgot to bring up my example, but that's okay. So thank you. So having things like a medication locking bag, so that if, you have people coming over and you want to make sure things are safe, keeping it locked up. We do have these in the lobby for you to take if you would like as you leave. Making sure you're keeping it out of the reach of children, teens, pets even. We can't forget about our pet safety. So this might be high up on a shelf if you can't lock it up, things of that nature. Really thinking about how it is safely stored and not going to be accessible to kiddos. And then the other piece to medication is disposal. So if you have unused or expired medications in your home, properly disposing of them, again, to decrease that access. And so, we want to make sure that we are disposing properly. Please don't flush them down the toilet because that messes with our water supply. But luckily, there are many options in our community about proper prescription medication disposal. Like Glenview Police Department has a prescription drop box. Northfield Police Department has a lock box. 24-hour Walgreens you can take them to properly dispose. So we want to make sure that any medication that we're not using or is expired that we are disposing of properly. One of the things, if you can't get to one of the local prescription drug drop boxes is we do have these doTERRA bags. doTERRA is a brand. It's actually a super convenient, helpful product. So if you can't get your medication out of your home properly, what these do is you open it up. There's some fancy stuff inside. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know exactly how it works. You put your medication in there, add some water, close it up, shake it up. It deactivates the medication, and then you are able to then safely throw it away. So this is also a really good option to be able to dispose of medications in a safe way. We also have some of these out in the lobby too. One of the things that our community does to help remind folks to dispose of medication is participating in National Drug Take Back Day. So this is run by the DEA twice a year, every October and every April. So the next one coming up is October 25. And so a lot of the police departments or village halls in our communities do, really encourage and focus on those specific days to dispose of your prescription drugs if you are no longer using them. And definitely, I think as October rolls around, we can, definitely provide North Shore Senior Center with some reminders and some signage of all the locations that are participating, just as helpful resources for you all on that. So switching over to thinking about alcohol and modeling, safe usage if you choose to engage in alcohol use, making sure we are drinking responsibly. One of the things is knowing and understanding how alcohol works, and knowing and understanding a standard drink. This is information that we are regularly talking with teens about to help them understand how alcohol impacts their bodies. But as adults, I think it's a really good reminder too to make sure we're being safe. So if you choose to drink alcohol, what is considered a standard drink is 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of liquor. All of those contain the same amount of alcohol. In thinking about how our bodies metabolize alcohol, that standard drink is a really important thing to keep in mind because our bodies are able to metabolize about 1 standard drink per hour. However, caveat, the next bullet point, our bodies do start to metabolize alcohol a lot slower as we age. So depending on your own body chemistry, your own ability to metabolize things, it could be a lot less for that kind of standard. Also, if you are prescribed certain prescription medications, that can also influence how our bodies then react and respond to alcohol. There are plenty of medications out there like opioids that say do not, use alcohol when you're taking this medication because it puts you, the user, the person taking that medication at a really high risk for some negative impacts. And definitely no drinking and driving. And really, as I think about how this really impacts youth and how we kind of integrate this into our conversations. If you're out to dinner as a family and alcohol is being served, being really open with the other adults about who's the designated driver, who is being responsible to make sure everyone is getting home safely, having open conversations about this as the adults to show that you want to make sure if an adult is engaging in use, they're doing so safely and responsibly, because that then will help the teen understand like, okay, yes, my parents, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents might be engaging in alcohol use, but they're making sure they're being safe about it and having that open conversation. So being really, really open about it. One really kind of quick side note, which I just think is so cool. And I wish this existed in Illinois. There was is some restaurant in New York, doesn't matter where, I guess. They had a really strict rule at the restaurant that if there were kids at the dinner table at this restaurant, and if an adult was having alcohol, the waiters, the service staff had to ask who the designated driver was, and they refused to serve that person more than one drink. That was their policy at this restaurant, and that was just kind of the culture that they lived by to make sure that everyone was getting home safely. And I think that's such a cool message that that restaurant is sending, that like, hey, yes, we're a restaurant, we're a bar, you know, we're serving folks, but we are making sure we're doing our part to make sure that everyone is safe and everyone's being responsible. I've yet to come across that around here, but I think it's really cool. So I always like to share that. And then with cannabis use, you know, cannabis has been a really interesting topic for us in the field since legalization in Illinois. I mean, it's been 5 years now since recreational cannabis use has been legal in Illinois. And so I think there's still a lot of community norms and information and knowledge that we're all still learning on this topic. But definitely if, you know, as an adult, you're choosing to use cannabis, it's making sure you're understanding the dosage, the method of use. Because like I had mentioned earlier, cannabis today is way different than what it was decades ago. The potency, that strength is much, much stronger than what it used to be. Knowing and understanding a THC overdose. Yes, you can overdose on THC products, mainly because the potency is so strong. Making sure if you have cannabis products, it is locked up. So while we typically call these medication locking bags, if someone has cannabis in the home, you absolutely can use these to lock that up too. And making sure you're not mixing THC products with alcohol or other medications, because there can definitely be some negative impact on that. And so again, as we're thinking about preventing and impacting and influencing our youth, we do want to make sure that we are being open and honest in modeling these responsible behaviors if we as adults are choosing to engage in use. Ah, what has happened? Oh, I'm hitting the wrong arrow. I was like, wait a sec. All right. And so, wow, I hope we're good on time. Okay, awesome. Wanted to make sure we had time for questions too. So these are just some local resources, and we didn't ask this before, but we can also send these as a PDF so that people can access them later. So on the left side are some local treatment organizations. So if you are concerned about a youth in your life, an adult in your life who might be struggling with youth, this is a list of local treatment centers. Peer Services might be on top of the list, a little self-serving, but there's, you know, luckily we do live in an area where we do have access to a lot of resources, including these. So these are a number of organizations that do have substance use specific treatment. And then on the other side of the screen are just some other really great resources if you are looking for additional support and information. All of these are hyperlinked, so if we are able to get you PDF version of these, you'll be able to hyperlink. Partnership to End Addiction is a fantastic website, not only for someone who might be struggling with use, but it really is for families. So there's a lot more information on there. If you do have a family member, whether it's an adult or a teen who is struggling with use, there's some really, really great resources and information through them. National Institute on Mental Health, they have a ton of research and information. Addiction Policy Forum is a really fantastic resource for materials in other languages. They have done a really great job of, I think a lot of their materials are like translated into like 17 or 18 different languages. And so if other languages on some of this stuff is needed, they're a really great resource for that. Smart Recovery is a program organization that really supports someone who's living in recovery. NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, also have some really great supports and whatnot. And then the last one I wanted to mention, if you all may or may not be familiar with the living room programs. So we partner with a couple other organizations in Skokie and Evanston through their living room programs, but I also know Jocelyn Center, up here in Northbrook or wherever they're located. They also have living room programs, which is an alternative to emergency rooms. So if someone is experiencing a mental health crisis or struggling with substance use and they don't want to go to the emergency department, because who wants to go to the emergency department? We have living room programs, which are staffed by certified mental health professionals and peer support recovery specialists. So it can be a really great alternative if someone is in need. So we are going to pause there and open it up to any questions that folks might have, or pass it back to our moderators as this gets wrapped up.
Well, thank you. That was a wonderful recap of lots of things we can do. Let's give them both a big hand. We have a microphone, and if there are questions, we can certainly go and pass this around.
It was Aaron, I think, that mentioned your child, your grandchild. You want to give them ideas of how do I came to the party and I didn't know there were going to be
Yep.
drugs, alcohol, or whatever. So what specifically did you discuss with them?
Well, sure. So in that regard, one of the things that we talk about the most is helping them and potentially their parents, if their parents are involved in the situation, essentially coming up with like a code word or a code phrase that they can text to whoever their trusted adult. Maybe that's you, maybe that's the parent, maybe it's an aunt and uncle, whatever, neighbor. And then as soon as that adult gets that text, they know to like come get them, no questions asked. Like that's like their, I don't want to say it's like their cry of help, but it could be like, hey, grandma, can we make cupcakes? And that, oh, they texted that they want cupcakes. They need help. I need to support them. I need to get them. And then, the parent, the grandparent, whoever texts back, oh, hey, we need to go run to the grocery store. I'm going to come pick you up right now. And then it kind of gives them an out of that situation. So they don't lose face with their friends. They can blame it on the adult. Oh, my grandma has to come pick me up. I need to go help do this. And then they are able to safely, easily remove themselves from that situation.
It's very good. At what point do you see these young people? Now, for years and years and years, we've seen the media glamorize all kinds of substance abuse. And most of the time, even it shows the people in the movies or videos falling over, and their lives are almost ruined, and you would think that maybe they would get the message. But at what point, now do you wait for the young people to come to you? No, you don't. And you go to them. Okay, you want to, so I don't understand. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the prime ages adding to this?
Yeah, definitely. So the youngest kids that we work with for prevention and kind of where we should start is 4th grade. I know, which is like people think is wild.
So give us an age. So you're talking 10 years old, 10-year-old?
Yeah, 9, 10. Yeah, right around that age. So
that's the higher risk.
So no. So especially with what we're doing in prevention is stopping something before it starts.
Right.
So we want to get to the kids.
That's the influential age.
Right. And so what we really focus on in prevention, in working with that young of a population, is helping them, build a ton of the really important social emotional skills like decision making and goal setting and emotional regulation and handling peer pressure. And then we do start to talk to them about kind of the scientific aspect, the risks to their brain, the risks to their body about alcohol use, nicotine use. We don't really start talking about cannabis until like 6th grade. So that comes a little bit later, although our 4th graders have a lot of questions about it. And so really making sure that they have the really basic facts and the risks associated with use so that they can then make that informed choice. Because to your point about the media and advertising, as it has been for decades and decades and decades, there's a whole lot of information out there, like you said, that glamorizes it, that makes it look like it's the normal thing to do. And one of the other pieces and why we don't go the scare tactic route is teens also think they're invincible. And all of that stuff ain't gonna happen to me. And so that type of thing just at their developmental cognitive age just doesn't work. But I will say our kids love to learn about the brain. And all we do is talk about how all these different substances impact their brain. And so we're getting super scientific about how all this stuff is. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the fourth grade level. I can't tell you how many people in recovery I have heard use the expression, well, my first drink was cleaning up the party after our home. They would sip out of the glasses, and that was oftentimes their introduction to alcohol. I wanted to tell you something that I learned many years ago when I was studying drug and alcohol abuse. And that was Carl Jung's letters to Bill W. He was one of the founders. Jung was one of the helpers in founding AA. He told Bill W. that when we lose our spirit with an uppercase S, we often turn to spirits with a lowercase s. He said it in Latin. I won't do that. But, you know, I have difficulty with programs like the one you're marking up here, simply because they misuse the words disease and disorder. They oftentimes call alcoholism a disorder. I have a movement disorder. I have a speech disorder. It's a pain in the butt. But alcoholism is not a pain in the butt. Alcoholism is an addiction, and an addiction will kill you. It's a disease. And any disease that you know, heart disease, anything like that will kill you. So we have to be careful and not think lightly about this subject, especially when it comes to children. Children are bombarded with information about, I think some of them know more about it than you and I know.
Yeah. But thank you. You are absolutely right. Addiction is a disease, and we have a long way to come in our society to change that language and change that perspective. But it absolutely is a disease.
Hi, you've made a lot of very good points, and I'm a pediatric neurologist, so
Amazing.
I do appreciate what you do, because when my children were in high school, there were a lot of good programs that were establishing the preventative education. However, I think the difficulty that I see in the North Shore, and I don't like to generalize and this is not a judgmental comment, but it is about modeling. And, you know, society has emphasized socialization via alcohol. So in their homes, the modeling is, you know, it's always a weekend party. It's always whatever else. It's hard to separate that from what is normal and abnormal. But the other thing is that at least when my children were in high school, their peers were drinking because the parents would say, we'll take away the keys. They can come here and drink. And how do you get away from that? You can't. You know, it's sort of like the education goes to the parents who don't realize there is a certain line of addiction that people will get regardless, but the modeling is about alcohol socialization. It still is.
Yeah.
You know, I want to add on to what she said. My question is that when I was a kid, went to school, users were losers. People that were drunk at school or taking hard drugs. The leaders of our leaders within the school would see them as losers. When our kids went to school, it was the leaders that were sometimes patterning behavior that was cool. So how do you deal not just with people our age that might have influence, and we may not, with our grandkids. But the high school basketball
Mhm.
leader, the others that they see within their classes, that peer is very influential. How are you working with them to let them be leaders within their community?
Oh, is that okay? I think something that from what I've seen from what we've done at New Trier High School and a lot of other high schools in the area is kind of reframing the norms for our kids. So a thing that we like to really emphasize when we are speaking to our middle schoolers and high schoolers is that most of their peers do not use, that this is not the norm, and the majority of our high school and middle school students, based on the data that we have collected and that we see, most of them do not use. And that can kind of help reframe what the norms are. And it is true that, I mean, I am not too far off from high school. And like when I was in high school pretty recently at Glenbrook North, it was true that a lot of the more like popular groups or more athletic groups are the ones who are using substances, and it can be seen as the norm and as kind of the cool thing to do. So I think that just reframing what those social norms are is super important, and coming in from an outside organization into a school, it can be hard to make that effective because there is a certain level of school culture that is kind of ingrained in every school, but just taking those small steps to kind of inform youth what the actual trends are and what the norms are is pretty helpful.
Yeah, and we do in a number of the high schools around here, we are working with certain student groups so that the kind of the prevention messaging is coming from other youth. And so we are, I mean, I've been at Peer doing this, yeah, working with North Shore schools for 11 years now. And what you're saying, you know, what you said about the culture here is absolutely true. And we are continuously trying to address that. And yeah, that social norming piece is huge. And also empowering parents to support other parents in those no use messages. I am a parent, my oldest is in middle school, and yeah, the peer pressure that I get from other parents about certain social things, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we are adults here. So empowering parents to say, no, the norm is no use. We are not allowing alcohol in our house. We are not allowing, you know, the after prom, after homecoming, lake house extravaganza where there could be, you know, substance use. And it's really empowering the parent generation to enforce that, help enforce that for their kids. So yeah, it's tough.
Over here. One of the things that I might mention to all of you, and we're in the same boat. I'm assuming, and not everybody, but most of us are parents, some of us are grandparents. And this young lady over here, I believe you said pediatrician, or what was it? Neurology, okay. Anyway, regardless. Okay. Misinformation. The best thing you can do in terms of abuse and problems like this is be informed. And I will cite myself as a perfect example of it. My son is an alcoholic, as I had mentioned the intro to this program. He's a recovering alcoholic with 23 years of sobriety now. I went into Al-Anon. So how many people know what Al-Anon is? All right, so fairly well informed. For those of you who don't, Al-Anon is for the friends and families of alcoholics. They have similar things for people with narcotics, for gambling, all kinds of sex addicts, believe it or not. But the misinformation, and that would include me. I was 60 years old when I went into Al-Anon, and I went into Al-Anon out of desperation. I had reached my rock bottom as far as dealing with my son being an alcoholic. Alcoholics, when they come into AA, have reached their rock bottom. But going into Al-Anon thinking, well, I'm going to find out how to make my son stop drinking. No. You find out very quickly that what you are addressing is yourself. The alcoholic's problem is his problem. Your reaction to it is your problem. And that's where I talk about misinformation. So the more that you can glean educationally in terms of what this is, I was glad to hear you point out this being a disease, not a disorder, it's a disease. Do we go as far as to say genetic?
Oh, yeah, there's a huge genetic
Okay.
component. Absolutely.
Nobody else in my family, well, I shouldn't say that. My first practice wife is an alcoholic. But this is something we found out years later, though. But educate yourselves, find out as much as you can about it. And specifically, if you have a relative or a friend, whoever it is, do not indict based upon what's going on with them. They have a disease. We got one more question over here. As I said, pardon my slow walking, but we'll get there.
Hi, what about the 12-step recovery programs? Where do you interact with them or promote them, or it wasn't included in your list of resources?
Well, and I guess we're focusing on prevention, not as much on the recovery side. So, with substance use disorders, everyone's recovery journey is different. What works for one person might not work for the next person. What might work for you right now might not work for you in 5 years. So yeah, definitely, as our communities, we are having more, I guess, options and variety of recovery resources. And yeah, for, people, AA in that community is the defining moment of their recovery. And it is a huge part of their recovery. And that's fantastic. But for those that's not the right fit, we want to make sure that there are other things, or combination. We have a number of clients at our agency who, they're in individual counseling. They might be part of our medicated assisted recovery program, but then they're also in AA. And so it's, whatever works best for that person's journey. Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Okay, we have to wrap it up. Thank you both. This has been a great presentation.